So welcome everybody to the show. Today's guest is Jennie Harland-khan. I met Jennie 3 years ago now in Barcelona, Spain at the first ever Mindvalley University, where she was running the kids program with some other volunteer parents that wanted to provide great experiences for their children that were coming to this wildly experimental and super ambitious program. And in that time when I met Jennie, she mentioned, I had never traveled out of the US before, that she was living in Chamonix, France, which I knew was one of the adventure capitals of the world. One of those places where you show up and there's parachutes everywhere, mountain bikers, mountaineers, everyone is doing all sorts of awesome outdoor whitewater rafting and everything. So I really had it in my mind that sometime in my life I would go. And as it turns out, Jennie was just this awesome person that I got to meet throughout that month in Barcelona. And I was like, hey, like maybe I'll come up to Chamonix. And I know Eric Strauss, this friend of mine, wants to come as well. And Jennie was like, well, wouldn't you know, myself and my husband, Babs, who is an awesome person I'm sure we're going to talk about, are going to be gone, but our kids are going to be hanging out in Chamonix. So what if you guys just stayed at our house and watched the kids for like 3 days? And my first reaction was like, what? My second reaction was I was actually like a coach for a motivational speaker who worked with youth when I was 18 and 19 years old and maybe a little bit of 17 as well. So I got really excited about spending some time with the children of some awesome adults that I got to meet. And I got to see Zach and Lita, your children, a little bit throughout Barcelona. So I went to Chamonix. Everything was amazing. I got to really bond with the kids and it was really fun hanging out with them and Eric. And then before I knew it, I was traveling all over the globe to hang out with you guys. And we've just kept in touch ever since. I ended up going to Jennie's mastermind, which was called Exponential, which was an incredible experience. Also in Chamonix, in the mountains, where a bunch of super, super high performing people came in, talked about their lives, worked through business things with masterminding, but also worked through a lot of personal stuff that these very high achievers, high performers get into. And it's funny enough that we all had very similar experiences in life. And it was just an incredibly formative moment in my traveling career, but also introducing me to so many great people where I really got to bond with people like John Davey, who's going to be on the show at some point because he is incredible. And it helped me get to know you guys and to develop probably this lifelong bond that will always get to hang out in different parts of the world, and introduced me to the wonderful work that you do that I would like to talk about today. But we're not going to get into that quite yet, because something that is so inseparable from you and my mind is your connection to your children. And having recently spent so much time with these 3 little ones that I've been traveling with for about 15 months, this idea of being a parent, this idea of having children around has really transformed me. And I would say before having them around, I had that eternal question that young people have, which is, should I ever have kids? It feels like it takes so much work. You have so little time. What about my own goals and dreams and ambitions and desires and fun stuff that I do? And my perspective has been entirely changed, and I won't share that yet because I want to ask you a question that I think a lot of maybe millennials, some Gen Z, maybe even some older people are still wondering, which is, why should anyone or should anyone have kids?
That's a big question, and I love it. So I guess the word in that question, should, is no one should have kids. I'd say that. No one should have kids. However, and I'm going to talk from experience here, obviously, as my own journey, but also, you know, what I see for others and you know, people I coach with kids as well. And for me, it has been the most expansive personal growth journey, not only just in my own growth, but also has expanded my world beyond what I even thought was possible. Now, what I will say, that's been an absolute conscious choice as well. Probably not to start with, you know, you kind of, you know, I always knew that I would someday have kids, and I went to university, and then I I traveled for 4 years, so I definitely got, I literally backpacked for 4 years. So I got a lot of that out of my system. And then I had started my professional life in London. And then there was the natural progression. I was lucky. I actually met Babs, can you believe this, when I was 14.
Oh, I had no idea. Are you from like the same little town?
Well, he came to my school. He was, anyway, that's the story. We won't get into that. But I knew him when I was 14, and there was actually a connection there, which was interesting. And then re-met many years later when I was 25 or something. And so I was very fortunate in that I met my soulmate, whatever you want to call it, early on. And so I've had this relatively smooth, kind of expansive 20s where I did so much, and I met my man, and we then got married, and then the natural progression was to have kids. And actually, after Lita was born, that's when I had a bit of a meltdown, probably my first meltdown, when she was about 18 months old, which was basically playing out the fears that you just spoke about in terms of should I have kids. Because as much as I loved, I loved being a mother, there was this part of me that was going, I've got no idea who I am now. Like, I felt like my identity had gone. I felt like there was resentment with Babs. It was, just from the female perspective, it was like, oh, it's okay, you can go and live your life and do what you're doing still, and I'm kind of sitting here changing nappies and, doing all that stuff. So that could have gone one or two ways. Now, for many people, that feeling lasts for a very long time as parents. But for me, and I have to give Babs a lot of kudos for this, what happened is that I remember can't complain, we were in Australia, we were bush camping in the wilds, and it was an incredible adventure, and yet I was in this real funk. And Babs had gone off fishing, and he came back that night, and he could tell I was in a kind of grump. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." And he said,
just a little Pandora's box.
Honestly.
Let me just pop that.
He said, so
brave.
He said, "Yeah, there is." I was like, "I'm fine." And he went, "Fine, Jen? That's an interesting word." I was like, "Well, if you must know." And then it just went poof. And I kind of went on this rant, like, it's all right for you, you're just fishing all day, I'm looking after 2 toddlers on the beach, and like turned into the woman that I always said that I wouldn't turn into. And I thought he was going to put his arm around me and say, "Babe, I'm sorry, you chill out, I'll take the kids tomorrow, you just go and do whatever." And he didn't. Now, you know Babs. And he turned and looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "Jen, stop being such a bloody martyr and choose to do something." And at that point, I picked up the fish that he'd caught and just went and just chucked it and did this dramatic. And I don't do dramatic, I'm pretty chilled, and it's probably like the one time in my life that I've really blown up. Stormed off down the beach, and there was this storm happening, and as I was watching, I suddenly became aware of nature just doing its thing. I was like, wow, like nature has this purpose, and it's natural, and I'm not feeling that at all for myself. And he's absolutely right. I've got to shift my perspective on this and choose. Anyway, so I kind of ran back to the tent, having had this epiphany. And he was in the tent snoring. I'm like, dude, I've just had this incredible insight. And then the next insight dropped in, which was, he can't do this for me. You know, the one person that would do anything for me in the world, he cannot do this for me. Like, I've got to take responsibility for myself as a mother, as a individual. And from there, what happened was this reignited mission to really discover, you know, what was next for me. And it led to the path of coaching. You know, I got some coaching, and then I just, things started happening really quickly for me, and people around me were saying, what's going on? I want a bit of that. And people just naturally started asking me to work with them.
Like, what kind of things were happening?
I started really small. In fact, I did this program, which is hilarious because I don't really do goal setting or anything now, but it was Dax Moy. I don't know if you know Dax Moy. He's English guy. He's been at A-Fest actually. And he had this program called Magic 100. And it was basically 100 things you want to do in 100 days. And it was a Kickstarter. Because as a parent, you can really get into that place of, I don't have time. I don't have time to do anything. Which is absolute bullshit, actually. We just don't choose it. We don't choose it. And the insight that I had was like, I am not choosing life right now. I get to have both. You know, just because I have kids, it doesn't mean I don't have to have a life. And so, you know, I remember one of the things, I can't believe I'm admitting this on air, was that I'd never really learnt to swim properly. You know, I could sort of go like this, but I wanted to be able to freestyle properly. So I was like, right, I'm going to learn to be able to do a straight kilometre within 100 days. And so I signed up for this swimming course and I turned up. And the point about it was a weekend course, which meant I had to leave the kids and get Babs to sort it all out. And of course, when I told him, he went, yeah, sure, of course. And that's one of the things we have in our heads is like, well, I can't because I've got to do this. It's like, well, do you ask for help? I wasn't. You know, I was in this martyr mode. And so I went to this swimming course and...
Yeah, just assuming that everyone would say
no.
no.
Or just be too difficult, or they wouldn't be able to do it right, or whatever, you know. Yeah. And got to this swim course, and it turns out it's for triathlete training. So there was all these triathletes and me. So that in itself...
Everyone's super hardcore.
It was hilarious, and they video you and then play it back in the classroom, and the instructor said, Jen, I thought I'd seen everything until this. But again, it was such growth. And the reason I'm telling you these stories is because that was the beginning of me doing stuff for myself and building that muscle of throw yourself in, Jen, throw yourself in. And these might seem like little things, but they accelerated very quickly. And because then the next thing I knew, I was getting on a plane to go and train with Bob Proctor. You know, it was like 20 grand, which we didn't have. And, you know, going off for 10 days or so. So I went from that little weekend to investing in myself, you know, first investment I'd ever made in that respect, flying halfway around the world and training with one of the best in that realm, like one of the godfathers of personal development. And it basically happened from there. And what I realized, the more I did that and the more I got into action around that, the more expansive my world became. You know, it was the equivalent of a first A-Fest, I guess. You know, that came down the line, but it was similar. I suddenly had global connections. I was sort of singled out within this. There was 80 of us, and I was singled out as being one to watch. I'd never done this stuff before, you know, and this sort of came. This all happened within 4 months of throwing a fish at Babs.
So it was very, very,
very
fast. So
fast.
you're saying in the 100 days that you said you wanted to learn to swim, in that same 100 days, you went to the Bob Proctor thing?
Yeah, it was a month after that. Yeah.
Wow. So you pedaled to the metal.
Yeah, I'd made a decision. I was like, take control, Jen. Like, choose. What he said to me, that don't be a martyr, choose to do something, hit me such deep in my core. And it triggered all of this stuff. And what I found then, if you sort of fast forward, I just made decisions from this place. And the next thing I know that, you know, I feel like, you know, and I'm not saying it was easy creating my coaching practice. It's actually never been that easy. But I remember we went off on a 6-week camping trip with the kids. Actually, backtrack a little bit. What happened after the Proctor thing? Babs's business folded in London. It was a marketing agency. A big client defaulted. And he said, let's go to Australia for a couple of months. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was still in the mindset, no time, no money, and kids. And I'm lucky, I'm married to him. And he said, Jen, trust me, let's just go. And in the end, we did, and Babs's brother's here. It's where I am right now. And it started a thing whereby I realized that the world didn't end. You know, like you make a decision, you step into it, and the world sort of conspires to support that. It really did, when it's coming from a real decree, this is what we're doing. And it was a muscle that we've built over, or certainly for me, it's been a muscle that's been built, you know, year on year. And so for the next few years while the kids were young, every year we were like, okay, well, let's take 6 to 8 weeks out. And then they started school, and we were like, let's still do that. And everyone around us was saying, but what about school? I'm like, they're 4, they're 5, they're 6, you know. And so it became a no-brainer for us. It just became part of who we were to go on experiences and adventures with the kids, because they got so much out of it.
And I want to bring something up to back up and say that you, like, Babs said that to you, right? Like, don't be a martyr, do something about it. For you to take that and, you know, first get upset, throw the fish at his face, and then to go off, but then for you to actually grow from that, I don't want to say like it's a rare thing that someone could take something like that and grow from it. But what do you think, and I'll start with saying, what do you think is the reason that you are able to do that in such a healthy way, to respond to that in such a healthy way?
It's a really good question. I've never really thought about it. I guess I don't know. I mean, I've always, despite never, I mean, I'd done Landmark, I guess, so I'd had an opening, I had a bit of a kind of experience of, you know, opening up to this kind of work. So I guess my consciousness was a little bit open then. And I think one of the main things is the deep respect I have for Babs and our relationship. And so when he says something like that, I know it's not coming from a place of anything other than love. and the willingness for him to speak that truth for me, I was being called to step up and hear it. And I think that's testament to the kind of relationship that we have. Like if someone else had said that to me, but perhaps, like if that's, I gotta listen when he says something like that. Mm-hmm. Because we speak truth to each other. And we don't argue, we just don't, we just communicate really well. And therefore, when he said something so, there was no anger in it. It was the tone with which he said it. Jen, stop being such a bloody martyr. Choose to do something. Like, whoa.
Love it.
So I think it's the respect with our relationship, and also, I guess, my own self-awareness.
I have so many questions to dig into about that. What do you... I have two questions. You can answer whichever one you think is more, I guess, calling to you or more valuable in your first response. First question is, how did you two cultivate that level of respect for each other? Was it something that you had right at 14? Like you just had like this deep knowing of like, I trust this person, they trust me? Or was there a series of things that caused you to gain that level of respect and trust for each other? And then the second question, I know that's an exciting one. And the second question is, are there practices that you two do today that continually graduate that level of trust and respect for each other? And I'm presuming that you might want to answer those sequentially.
Yeah, and they roll into one, actually. So I think the way in which our relationship started, I mean, yes, we kind of knew, he was a couple of years older than me in school, we'd clocked each other. There was definitely something going, sort of, or whatever you want to call it, at 14, I mean, hell. And then we'd sort of had a brief encounter when I was 17, and then we went off and did our thing. Like at 17, we literally came together, knew that it was something kind of had to happen because it was there, but also both of us knew that, and that's done, kind of me go on his way, him go on his way. And what happened after that, like I said, I went to university, and then as did he. I still had a couple of years of school. And then we both traveled, so we both kind of had that. And when I met him the second time, I was still in my traveling period. I'd come home, my mum was remarrying, so I came home for the wedding. And I just bumped into him in my local pub where I'd seen him last. And it was just this immediate thing. And I was home for like 4 or 5 months. And we just went poof. And at the same time, I said, and I'm not done. I'm leaving in November. And he said, okay.
Was that tough for you?
Yes. But I knew that I had to go. Like I was not done. I wanted to go back to New Zealand, do a ski season there, and like I knew that I would resent him if I didn't go and do my thing. And so this is where the respect piece comes in. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. He said, yeah, I understand. And then we just had an agreement that we would continue communicating and see how it went. So I went for a year. 6 months into that year, I was in Thailand. I was like, I need to come home and check if this is for real. Because at that point, Skip, you're not even going to believe this, there was no email. we were like writing letters, picking them up at the post office.
Internationally?
Oh yeah, I was in Nepal and Thailand and Vietnam, and we're like writing letters.
How did you do all that travel? Was it money you had saved up? Was it credit? Was it family?
No. So post-uni, I worked, well, I went to France first and did like a au pairing and then a ski season. And then I worked for like a solid 8 months and saved everything. And then I worked my way around the world. I was just waitressing and bar work and stuff. But so I came home to see him for 3 weeks to really decide, like, because I kind of wanted to live in New Zealand. So I had to make a choice. So I came home for that 3 weeks.
What part of New Zealand?
Well, I was hanging out in Queenstown, of course. And I came home for those 3 weeks, and again, it was just like, poof. And then we had an agreement. I would go finish, do another 6 months, and I'd come back to London. And that was how it started. And the fact that we both, firstly, I didn't give up everything for him. In a way, you know, I still went and did my thing. He respected that. I respected the fact that he let me go. I mean, wrong words, but, you know, and then we were very honest about what was going on for each other during that year. And then when I came back, you know, we'd both agreed that was the right thing to do. So I think it was just built on independence, respect, a lot of long distance communication, and that created a really strong foundation. You know, and we both hold family as a highest value. And I think that played a big part.
And then what do you do even today between each other that continues? Is there anything intentional that you do that builds that respect and trust with each other?
Yeah, separately and together. So, you know, firstly, we both continually invest in our own growth. And we talk all the time. Like, we talk a lot.
What does investing in your growth look like for you and then for him? Like, what does that look like?
So, you know, whether that is investing in my, you know, business growth and my professional coaching skills and all that kind of stuff. And then just sort of personal development work, you know, and doing something at the moment which is all around, which is something that Babs has just done, but with someone else. But it's more kind of the archetype work, working through, you know, shadow work triggers that come up. You know, it could be anything. Like and we live in Bali, right? So there's stuff going on all the time. I mean, I'm pretty discerning now about what I do. It's not, I don't jump into one thing and another thing and another thing. So for example, to give you an example, I did Rich Litvin's 4PC Mastermind, which is around coaching, but actually it was more around self-leadership. And then, for example, Babs has just done a 3-month deep kind of men's work, a men's group, which was full on, and you know, while he was doing that, I was very much holding the space for him to go through whatever he was going through, because it was pretty emotional work. You know, so we support each other when we choose to do things. We've never actually done anything together when it comes to growth work, but you know, he's been amazing, because I guess because I'm in the industry, I get to know what's going on and who's doing what. If I ever say, hey, I think this would be a really good fit for you, he's like, okay, tell me, I'll do it. You know, he trusts me and my judgment as to what would, you know, potentially be a good fit. And then when it comes to us, sort of on the family couple side, we create, I'm going to use the word vision, but we don't sit there and create visions, but we get very clear on what's important to us. So we're super clear on our values. And so every decision we make as a family is aligned to that. So for us, it's about freedom of time, geography, adventure, family, and health. Anything that is not aligned with that, we don't do. Anything that is, it's just such a yes. And then the one thing that we have, the question that we always ask is, what would have us all thrive? And that's sort of our North Star. So often, I think probably about 3 weeks ago, we were just sitting having a coffee, and we were like, okay, so let's, we hadn't done it for a while. It's like, well, like, where are we feeling where there's areas for growth right now? And then we just talk about it. And then we'll make decisions together that maybe don't make sense logistically or rationally. But if it's aligned and we both get excited about it, we just go, okay, let's go. So, and that's really what led us to Chamonix and Bali, I guess. So, a prime example was we'd been sort of camping in France for 6 weeks, and Italy. We drove around. Kids were young. And we got to Annecy, and I was just standing in front of these mountains, and I was like, oh. And the energy and the vibrancy and just everything about it, I was feeling so alive. And all these fit people around, you like swimming the lake and running and cycling and climbing. And I just said out loud, I was like, oh my God, I could live here. And Babs just went, okay, let's do it. And we went to Chamonix the next day, checked it out. We went up, one of the gondolas looked down, and I went, okay. And then we went back home a week later. We told the school that kids were leaving, and packed up house. So, I think we're both willing to listen to what's in here and go with, the consideration of all of us.
And I really think, to accentuate that point that you say, you both grow individually often, and you support each other. It sounds like encourage each other, and it also sounds like sometimes challenge each other to grow. And the challenge comes from a loving place where it's like, it's not like an ultimatum of, if you don't
or
grow,
you need it,
I'll leave. It's like a
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to mention there is, often what comes with that is quite a big financial investment, and most of the time we don't have that lying around. And it's he really trusted. When I talked about that first investment with Procter, I wasn't really earning money because I just had the kids. And we didn't know where we were going to get it from. And yet he was unwavering, saying, we'll work it out. And it's been like that ever since.
Ever since, yeah.
Like, there's never this, we can't really afford that, or we can't. It's like, no, what do we truly want? What do we desire? And what do we need to create to have that happen? And I guess that's the place that we come from. And sometimes that's stressful.
And I've actually been around for a couple of those moments where you guys have had some huge life changes, and you've just, I don't even know, like if we read off your guys' resume of where you've lived, where you've traveled, the projects you've taken on, it's kind of insane when you say it all back to back, Yeah. So fast forward me, you did the Bob Proctor thing. Now that's probably 12 years ago or so, right? What do you do with your time now? why did you run Exponential? Like, who are you in the world?
Yeah, and I guess it's been a progression as well. And I think that's important I just think it's an important part of this for people to realize that, everything, we're always evolving, right? Or some people go from boom to boom. For me, it was definitely, when I first started working with people, it was with other mums who were like, I even read a book on Amazon. It's called I'm Back. How do you get your, I can't even remember, identity, I can't even remember what it's called. That's hilarious. When your kids go to school, because that's what
it's like, how do you get your kick-assness back?
Basically. Yeah. But as I grew and as I evolved, it was, I think for quite a while in the coaching world, the circles that I were in were very much about, and I hated it, but it was about be inspiring so other people would want to work with you and have an inspiring personal brand and blah, blah, blah. And look, I had the inspiring life, right? We were living it, as a life coach or whatever. But as a coach that deals with personal stuff,
yes,
you know what I mean? It was okay. At least I walked the talk, right? So there was definitely something there. But I didn't want to be the inspiration. I knew that I wanted to work with people who inspired the absolute pants off me, that had me grow, that I had to grow to step in to coach them. And I didn't know how to do that for a long time. Like imposter syndrome, like everything was going on. And until one day, once again, I just made a decision of like, no, because I nearly gave it all up because it just felt out of alignment. I was kind of working with whoever I could work with, whoever would have me. And in the end, I was like, no, I'm done with this. Like I really wanted to, I knew there was so much more. And I'd always had a fascination with leaders. Like I knew I wasn't ever going to be a sort of leader in the traditional sense of the word. I was never going to be the one, I'm not a visionary. I'm not someone that has any desire to run a big company or several companies. It's just not who I am. But what I started to realize when I backtracked is that when I came back to London in my 20s, early 30s, I was always the right-hand person to a visionary or, an entrepreneur. And I worked for several businesses. My first one was an economics consultancy. And I was taken on, I did economics, but I was taken on, I don't know why. And I would go to all the meetings with the guy that headed it up. The second one was, it was in the .com era, and I was taken on as investor relations. It's hilarious. It was like this classic beanbag Soho Square in London, 60 employees, none of us really doing anything. And I would go to all the investor meetings with the CEO. And then the next one was a sort of boutique headhunting company that worked with, the McKinseys and all that kind of stuff. And I would always go with her to all the meetings. And then the next one, I worked with a visionary that set up a charity.
And to clarify, what would you do in these meetings?
Nothing.
Were you like emotionally stabilizing?
Well, this is what I get
the visionary
now.
That was there?
This is what I get now. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why I was there. But they would always ask me to go with them. And then after the meeting, would go for a coffee or something, and then they would just talk about it. And so I felt like a complete imposter the entire time I was doing any of these things, because there was nothing practical, tangible that I was really doing. And then the last thing I did, which was a lot of fun. It was a transformational, it was a charity using sport as a tool for transformation, using football. soccer. And again, I was the right-hand person to the guy that set it up. And when I look back now, it's what I do. And it's very intangible, but I hold this space, I guess, energetically, where they feel, I don't even know what the word is, safe. I don't know, that it's a space for them to really step into what they're doing. It's almost like this safety net behind them. I don't even know. It's what I do now, though.
Like, I've been to your, Exponential. I've been to the program, one of your programs, right? And I remember when we went around the room for the first time, and I think there were 12 of us, maybe something like that, about 12 of us, and I was there filming and everything, and also sitting in on the sessions. It was such an awesome experience right after Barcelona. And having even been there when you did what you're describing right now, even it's hard for me to put it into words as well, but it was crazy to see the level of competence, achievement, and just the level of IQ that was in that room unload their experiences, their emotions, and also their ideas in such an open way. I had almost never seen that in a group before. And so I guess, you need a certain level of, let's call it, I don't know, presence or power or acceptance, or maybe nurturing is a big word I would put on your forehead with that whole thing, that allowed these people to really share their inner thoughts. And a lot of these high achievers can be so busy, or they can be so powerful that they don't get a lot of time to just let their own mind ricochet off of something that can allow that ricochet to happen, which is sort of what I saw you doing through that experience of it. And I guess that's what I would say it is that you do for people. And it's funny because I know 85% of the people that watch this show and 95% of my friends are looking for someone like you because when you sit around in circles of entrepreneurs and the creatives that I hang out with, everyone's like, I really just need like a steady, stable operator type of person around to like bounce all the insanity off of, that can hold that insanity and then help me weed out what's going on. I say this all the time to myself, right? And so I see like already how many people are probably going to be like, I would love to see what Jennie does.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the place that I'm coming from with it, I mean, there's partly is an energetic thing. Firstly, I'm like totally non-judgmental. You can tell me anything and I wouldn't, there's no judgment. But secondly, I'm not, when I'm in that space, I'm not actually really listening to anyone's story. I kind of really not that interested. And that might sound strange. But what I'm doing is energetically, I guess, creating a connection with someone, and I'm holding them and seeing them before the story, before the whatever's going on for them. I'm seeing them in their purest form, which is pure potential. And also the life intelligence that is in them. Therefore, I know that whatever is going on for them, firstly, they're okay. People can be in complete crises and I'll be like, yeah, you're okay. And they're like, oh, I just needed it. Because I know they're okay, because I know who they truly are. And when I say that, what I mean is we have everything within us to thrive. It's who we are. We have all the resilience, we have the, our innate wisdom, we have all the answers, we have everything. So I'm holding them in that space and I'm speaking to that part of them. And I think that's quite different from quite a lot of coaching, because oftentimes with coaching Coaches are listening to the story, like what are their beliefs, what's holding them back, and then you're kind of in the story. Whereas I'm sort of parking that, and I think people feel that, so they're able to sort of drop into this. The first thing that happens is they drop into a calmer space. It can happen really quickly. And when the thinking settles, you're left with clarity, because that's our natural state. And so really all I'm doing is facilitating a space for their clarity and for their own wisdom. I don't know the answer. I don't know what you need. No idea. But you do. And it's not really through clever questions. It's just just energetically bringing people back into their grounding people, actually. Because a lot of high achievers are just like, they're just spinning with ideas and busyness and everything else. And so really it's a chance for people just to, and all I'm interested in actually, what's the truth here? Like, how do you discern your truth with all the noise?
Are there any habits that you encourage your clients to do to help them stay in that space in between sessions?
Actually, no. Because, and this could be a little controversial here, what we talk about more is really understanding how thought and the mind works. And it's a sort of embodied understanding of that. So naturally, we all think, right? We've all got thoughts, loads of them. But they, left alone, they actually pass. So if you think about a cloud, right, with a lot of thick clouds, thunderstorms, it looks really dense, it looks really real, and this is what's gonna, this is what you're experiencing. But you don't actually have to do anything for those clouds to pass. The nature of clouds is that they move on. The nature of thought, if you realize it's just thought, it moves on, right? And so what we talk about quite a lot is there's a lot more to it, but is this fundamental, deeper understanding of how the mind works, rather than trying, because high achievers, they're busy. To give them a whole bunch of practices and habits and things that they now have to do in their morning routine and everything else, it's actually the last thing they want to do. And yet, when they understand this concept that I share with people, there's this feeling of relief, and they start to take life a lot less seriously. And so probably the most common thing I would say to people is, put it down. Just get out in nature. Not even sit and meditate for hours, 'cause it's almost like you're trying to do something to settle your thoughts. Whereas if you understand that it's natural, the pressure that gets taken off when you really get that. And it sounds too simple. It sounds too simple, but it's, when people really get this, their entire experience of life changes. The clarity they get is, off the charts.
I think as a reflection of what you're saying, from what I'm taking from it, to ask you if this is, I think what you're saying is like these high performers, right? These entrepreneurs, these visionaries, they tend to run very quickly. They tend to burn out very quickly. They tend to have a lot of things on their plate. And what you're saying is, instead of doing anything, maybe try not doing something.
Yeah, it's all around, it's all subtractive. So if you work with me, it's subtractive. This isn't the
So should I not do something for 60 minutes or 90 minutes?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, we just took off last week, right? Because I realized we were in this kind of trying to make things happen. And the thing with high performers, they're so flipping intelligent that they do make shit happen. They're really good at it. But they become incredibly reliant on their intellectual mind and become the one that has to do that. Whereas behind the intellectual mind is the genius. And so it's about how do we tap into that genius? And the genius lives in the space. And so, for example, last week I could feel that we'd got into this place of trying to, like, there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to work out at the moment. And so we've just took off for a week to a remote beach with nothing, no Wi-Fi, no electricity, no nothing. And just sat and read. I get that not everyone can do that, and they can. Choice. They think they can't. And when we came back on the Monday morning, it was like boom, 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 decisions, decisions, decisions. That's clear, that's clear, that's clear.
Beautiful. So in all of your time now, and I'm sure many more years, spent talking with all of these people, these types of people, what has that experience taught you, or what have they taught you? What would you say your top lessons are in life from doing this?
I just love humans. I just think they're fascinating. I think what it's taught me is that we're all extraordinary, actually. It doesn't matter what you do, who you are. And we all have the same stuff going on. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. And when people allow themselves to drop into connection, and everyone can do that, it's magical. It's so beautiful. And everyone, you know, what I've really learned from, you know, the leaders, there's three things that all of us are after, which is peace of mind, wanting to feel alive, purposeful, useful, and connection. And that's it. The reason we're doing everything is to get to one of those three things. Now, I thought before I started working with this group that there was something different, something, you know, like, who are these people? And they're the same as everyone else. And that I just love, and I've what I've seen and what I love about these people is that once they become okay in themselves and stop being in survival mode, because even more so, I mean, some of the billionaires I've coached in the world are in survival mode. And yet, once people actually come back to themselves, they automatically shift towards contribution and impact. And then what is so inspiring about this group is that they go do it. And that's what has me want to serve this client group, because their capacity is incredible. And I'm just blown away by how quickly, like, once they get it, they act, they go do it. And it continually inspires me. And I guess, you know, it's such a privilege, the work that I do. And I'm finally understanding that's how I get to have an impact. I always had this slight inferiority complex of like, well, I'm not one of those. In fact, my dad said to me once, there's leaders and followers in the world, Jen, and we're followers. And I was like, and what I've learned is actually that's not true. Like, we all have the capacity to lead, and some people do it in that way, and some people do it in my way, and some people do it through parenting, whatever it is. The capacity we have as human beings, when we get back to our humanness, is incredible.
To turn us on a highway exit, all of what we just talked about and all of this has been happening, and you've been doing this work since you first decided you were going to learn how to swim. First short question, yes or no, did you learn how to swim? Sweet. Second question, what is the relationship with your children like now that you stepped away from being a martyr and you and your husband Babs have done so much growth, and you do so many things now? What is that like with two
Amazing.
kids?
Best friends. You know, and sometimes they annoy the hell out of me. But they are, it's just fun. Like, I guess the way we approach it is that we're a unit, we're a team. It's not parents, kids. They're 16 and 14 now, right? We've just spent the last 7 months, 24 hours a day together. We came over to Australia. Our friends aren't here. It's us. Yes, we have occasionally with Babs's brother and family, but predominantly it's the four of us. And it's just, we've had so many experiences together. They're very independent. They're who they are. I took them to, 3, 4 AFES. We did Barcelona together. We've traveled the world. We've lived in different countries. And so we're very much a unit. And I think the way it works is that we have that mutual respect that I talked about in our relationship. It's not, like I said, parent-child, because we're always asking that question, what would have us all thrive? If one of us is out of thriving, we're like, what do we do? And so, they get included in all the decision-making. We spend a lot of time together, play together. They also go and do their own thing. It's like when Zach went to the ski academy, he went and lived in Italy for the seasons. Would come back at the weekends because that was what was going to have him thrive. And so we're always trying to look at them individually, like what is best for them, but we'll also have us thrive as well. So we don't really compromise. And as a result, the relationship between all of us, it's just fun. I think we just have fun because we're not like that.
To throw another reflection on that, it sounds like this is connecting to what we talked about before, where you've just extended what you and Babs do to include the children.
Yeah. That
each of the four of you focus on your own individual growth, and you encourage, support, and challenge each other to do that occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think we recognize the wisdom in them. And so that's a lot part of my work is really to seeing the wisdom in people. And so
Can you tell me a story about that with your kids?
Yeah. So Zach doesn't hear this one.
He probably will.
Well, okay, I won't go into details, but you and I spoke about this. But yeah, last year he's a teenager, and he decided to push the boundaries, shall we say, in Bali, and got himself into a bit of trouble. And it could have been a lot of trouble. And so we were faced with this real kind of parenting, our first sort of big, what felt like a really big turning point. It was like, oh my God, is this who he's going to be in his life? What have we done as parents? Like, I can't even believe he did that. Like, all of this. And so we had a real choice. Do we go into parenting mode, as in, take control? Or do we do what we usually do? And we went with the do what we usually do. And it was a real case of just sitting down, communicating, asking him, like, so what do you think we should do? What do you think would be the most powerful thing we could do as parents right now that would support you through this, but also have you learn and grow from this? And because we included him in that conversation, he actually came up with, what he thought was a good idea. And, he actually said to us this, he said, look, I get what I just done is completely, I don't even know why I did it, but whatever. He said, but you got to trust me. I know this is going to be the biggest gift. And there was a choice there for us to trust that or not, and we've trusted it and watched him transform over the past year. And I think, and I think that's such, if I had any advice, I hate giving advice, but any experience when it comes to parenting is never underestimate the wisdom of your own child. And really be present and listen to what's actually going on for them, rather than jumping into all these made-up scenarios in your head. So, and look, I remember a while back, he's having, this was when he was much younger, but he was having this real meltdown around going to it just felt such an entitled meltdown. It was sort of, friends had invited him to one of the villas in Bali, and he was new, and he's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. And we were like, well, can you decide so we know what we're doing? Anyway, it exploded. And so I just went and sat with him, and he was just kind of in this, and I just sat and I just didn't really say anything. And then eventually, I guess I did what I do, which is calm people down. And then I just said, so what's actually going on for you? And then he said, well, I feel so socially awkward. And he was young, he was 13, 12. And he just said, I feel socially awkward, and I don't know what to say when I'm around my friends. And so from that point, we could then work on that. But I needed to hear his wisdom for us to actually get to truth, or what he felt was truth. It's not truth, but what he felt was truth. And as soon as he said that out loud, he realized kind of how untrue that was. He said, okay, can you go and drop me off now? So off he went and had a great afternoon, but
it's literally a session with a billionaire CEO, but just translated to a 12-year-old child.
But we're all children, we all go into our child mode. So it's the same thing. So I think, I think that that's how we do things, really. And look, it sounds like I'm some freaking amazing parent. Really, I haven't got a clue. I'm literally working it out as I go along. And every stage is different, but what I would say, just that one piece of knowing that your children have this incredible wisdom within them, and holding a space to trust that, and getting them to learn to discern that and trust that themselves, you know, it's never going to be a smooth ride, particularly with Zach. He's a risk taker. You know that. He jumps off things and puts me in painful positions where I have to watch him do stuff. But it's who he is, and I've got to allow, you know, I can't curb that because of my fears. He's going to hurt himself. I've got to trust that he'll learn. So it's a journey,
Yeah.
to say the cliche.
So
Hang on, Skip, I've just dropped a
before we...
thingy.
Oh, yeah. No, go for it. I'll just ask you the question
Sure.
while you grab that. Before we wrap up, I have two questions. One is
a little more deep,
and one is not as much.
So the
first of the two is there anything with like current state of affairs in mind? You know, we've talked about this, but I don't believe in advice either. But if you had some wisdom from conversations or come up inside you in your coaching sessions or just from interacting with your family, is there any piece of wisdom that you would like to share before we go about anything going on right now in the world? Because there's like 7 different apocalypses.
Yeah. I would look, there's 7 different like, how do I say, I don't know, say that word. Apocalypses. Thank you.
You have to read more X-Men comics. That's how you learn how to say that one.
Look, your experience of life comes from within you. Whatever you're experiencing in any moment is coming from you, through you. So it doesn't really matter what's going on in the world. Like, as long as you know that, we're only ever really experiencing thought in the moment, right? And that depends what lens we're wearing. So if we're wearing a lens of fear and lack and anger and judgment and whatever it is, that's what we're going to experience. Now, that might sound a bit, I'm not suggesting what's going on in the world isn't important and everything else, but I'd kind of say stay in your lane. And really, you know, my word this year is discernment. Like, really discern what is your truth, rather than what the media is saying and what all the noise is saying. I mean, it's very easy at the moment because some of the practical parts of our life have closed down. And yet, I can walk up the street here and see a bird or hear a child laugh or whatever, and in that moment feel incredible joy, regardless of what's going on in the world. And so more than anything right now, I think presence, connection, discernment, rather than future thinking and past thinking. And, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people that are incredibly triggered at the moment are those that have, you know, understandably have had a lot of trauma in their life as well. And it's bringing past into present. And so the work really is that grounding presence, allowing for those clouds to pass.
Yes.
You know, because our life is happening moment by moment by moment. That's it. There is nothing else. Everything else is kind of made up. So, you know, as to circle back to the beginning, what are you choosing right now? Are you choosing to be a victim in what's going on in the world? Or do you choose to create your life, your moments?
Thank you. And then final question, when people hear this and fall in love with you, is there a place they can go to see more of you, learn more of your thoughts, or read anything like that?
Yeah. I'm not great at putting content out in the world. Look, you find me on Facebook.
It could also be
or,
anything you recommend as well.
Yeah. Look, I do on Facebook occasionally. I'm also coaching. I'm also about to start a training where I'm coaching coaches to coach leaders, those people that want to step into that space, because I genuinely feel we are so needed right now, and a lot of people are stuck in the lack of confidence to do that. So I'm talking quite a lot about that at the moment. But yeah, Facebook, you know, if there is genuine resonance with what I'm saying, I love to connect with people. I love to, like, just send me a message. Let's have a conversation. Like, super happy to schedule time with people, you know, who are seriously, there's something landing here for them. That's really how
generous. Thank you.
How I roll. It's no obligation. It's just relationship. I'm more of a kind of, I'm less of a masses person and more of like quality relationships. So yeah, so
beautiful.
Either on Facebook or my email's jennie@jenniehk.com. Jennie with an IE.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Yep, and I'll put that down in the show notes as well. Well, Jennie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having
it's
me.
always a blessing to get to talk to you. And, you know, I got so much out of this conversation, so I'm really excited for other people to hear it. And I definitely have a few in mind that are just going to love it.